following program is exclusively produced and distributed by Dick Dinman's Double D Productions, Inc., all rights reserved.
Hi, Golden Age film fanatics, and welcome to DVD Classics Corner on the Air. My name is Dick Dinman, and our goal is to become your exclusive guide to the very best of the Golden Age classics coming out on DVD. We'll have reviews, breaking news of upcoming releases, plenty of surprise guests, and a special feature devoted to the great Golden Age film composers, which we call Cinemusic. So let's turn on the marquee and lights, camera, action.
It's time for Dick's Picks, in which I get to shine the spotlight on one of my Dick's Picks of the week. I know. My devoted listeners must be getting awfully tired of the fact that every time our friends at the Warner Archive release their latest restored Technicolor classics on Blu-ray, I always say that is the most beautiful Technicolor restoration that I've ever seen, and I mean it. But, folks, I've just finished looking at the Warner Archive's Blu-ray release of the great Errol Flynn swashbuckler, Adventures of Don Juan, and its brilliance leaves me almost speechless, except to say that, yes, this indeed is the finest looking and sounding Blu-ray Technicolor restoration that I've ever seen. That is until the next Warner Archive Blu-ray Technicolor restoration appears. The Errol Flynn starer, Adventures of Don Juan, is now available in restored Technicolor magnificence from the Warner Archive, even as we speak. Stay tuned for more Dick's Picks, coming up on DVD Classics Corner on the Air very soon.
People run down Errol Flynn. Errol Flynn was a great movie star.
Absolutely.
Because if you tell these young fellas today, if you think it's easy to play a swashbuckler where you've got to be athletic, you've got to look great in costume, you've got to know how to wear costume, how to gesture with costume,
right.
You've got to be romantic, dramatic, funny, very difficult. These young fellows who are playing young fellas, it's not very difficult.
Right.
You know, Sean Penn or something played this resentful kid in a prison. Well, he's playing it right now, isn't he? He's in prison. And I mean, it's not very difficult. But I tell you, Errol Flynn, to my mind, gave some glorious performances.
Absolutely.
Glorious performances. Because Errol and I used to kid each other. He would say, "You got big hips, Jim, haven't you?" Because he had a wonderful body. I had wonderful shoulders and chest, but I had these big hips. You know, I had wide hips. And he had these wonderful slim hips. I said, "Yes, but I fight better than you do in fencing, because you hold the sword up and you don't put, you know." And he said, I said, you give the impression you're a great fighter because you've got such a beautiful body and you move so gracefully. But actually, Basil Rathbone was the good fighter, was Errol.
He was supposed to be one of the best, right.
In her golden era, basking in pomp and pageantry, when great legions brought her glory to one half of the world, and a fabulous adventurer brought her romance to the other half, when power-mad men sought to inflict their wills on the weak King Philip, and a lonely queen sought guidance to lead her people. When one man rallied a band of loyal followers to defy the conspirators, Don Juan, deadliest swordsman in all Europe, fighting his way into the strongholds of the oppressor and out of the dungeons of the Inquisitor, challenging the tyranny of the cruel Duke of Lorca wherever he finds him, as he gives his sword to his country and his heart to his queen.
All my life I seem to have been stumbling around as if in darkness. I am no longer.
Silence! You have no right to speak to me that way. I forbid you.
But I would never have spoken except by your command.
Then I was wrong to command you. Wrong to believe that friendship and loyalty could ever replace your desire for another conquest.
Tell me, Don Juan, do you hire men to spread the tales of your romantic conquests?
Some men prefer the conquest of beauty to the conquest of a throne.
I asked you that when I was queen, but I am no longer.
And I shall be the only one to know that for just a little while there was no queen.
I warned you, senor. This time I shall cut deeply.
Be sure it's deep enough.
My first guest, Anne Rutherford, was a lovely and talented fixture in some of the finest cinema hits released during what we now know was the golden age of film. She co-starred as sweet, innocent Polly Benedict in 12 Andy Hardy films, as Scarlett O'Hara's sister Corinne in Gone with the Wind, as well as co-starring in such distinguished film classics as A Christmas Carol, Pride and the Prejudice, and, shockingly, as one of Errol Flynn's soon-to-be-wed conquests in Adventures of Don Juan. And the one thing I wanted to say about your participation in The Adventures of Don Juan,
yes,
I'm a little shocked. I'm a little bit shocked to see Polly Benedict fooling around with Don Juan and Errol Flynn. Now, what happened to Polly Benedict from the Hardy series that she's
they
now...
They made Polly Benedict into a lamb. No, that was a giant step for me to play. Well, I did another movie called Pride and Prejudice.
Oh, yes.
Where she ran away without benefit of clergy.
Right, right.
And disgraced herself. That made me terribly happy. But this, my cup runneth over.
Yeah.
When they sent me out and I discovered that I was going to be no better than I should be. I was just enchanted.
Listen. Every evening that nightingale sings here. How sad and sweet his song is.
Yes. And my heart sings with him, sweetly, because you're by my side.
And my heart is very sad. For soon you must go, and tomorrow...
Tomorrow I shall fence very badly, because my eyes will be drawn to the platform where you are.
No, I won't be there tomorrow.
Oh, you won't?
No, I'll never be there again.
Oh, my darling, we'll be together all the days of our lives.
I'm getting married tomorrow. I know you must think it capricious of me to be here with you the night before my wedding.
No, not at all, not at all.
You don't?
Well, perhaps just the least little bit.
I did it so I could remember for all the years of my life, this evening here in the garden, with Don Juan.
Well, I'm delighted to have been of service.
That's why we must never see each other again. Never.
Never. Never. I know you'll forgive my hasty departure. Prolonged sentimental farewells are too painful. Good night, beloved.
And of course, I was delighted to work with Errol Flynn. I've been just such an avid fan of his ever since he and Olivia de Havilland were the two of the most beautiful young people on the face of the earth.
Indeed.
And, of course, by the time he did The Adventures of Don Juan, he was no longer one of the very young people.
Right.
Nor was I, but he was still... He was still a glorious-looking man, even though he had abused his face in every way possible through the years.
He was only...
Too much sun, too much sea, sailing, drying your skin and all that stuff. And, and of course, his enthusiasm for an alcoholic drink.
Yeah.
But he was sober as a judge on the picture, and he behaved himself beautifully. He was much better behaved than his little monkey, which was diapered and sitting on his shoulder between all the scenes.
Yeah.
He was really a character with that little monkey. But he was a joy to work with. He knew all of his dialogue, and he didn't bump into the furniture, and he sometimes would have a totally different reading, and it was wonderful.
Yeah.
It was like working with someone who was a fine instrument. He was awfully good.
Yes.
I don't think he was ever given the opportunity to prove that he was indeed a fine actor. He was so busy prancing around with his sword and his shield.
Well, it's funny because quite a few years ago, I met the director of The Adventures of Don Juan, Vincent Sherman. And Vincent Sherman told me that Flynn was great for the first month, but then when Flynn read some of the reviews of his previous picture...
He had misbehaved.
And then the rest of the film, unfortunately, did not go that well. Is it possible that you were participating in Don Juan in the beginning of the schedule as opposed to the end?
That I do not recall.
Yeah.
All I know is, this was a long time ago. It was, 51 or something?
No, 48.
48?
Yeah.
Well, honey... You're about 58 years too late to be interviewing someone with Errol Flynn. I may be the only person still alive who worked with him.
By the way, I took a look at The Adventures of Don Juan last night, and it is a glorious film.
Oh, it really was. Vincent Sherman was such a fine director.
Yes.
He took great pains, and he had very novel ideas about some of the scenes.
Yes.
And it was most refreshing working with him. And, of course, the costumes were heaven. A couple of the things that I wore, I think I only did wear two, are in our local Los Angeles museum on Wilshire Boulevard.
Really? Well, you know, the film was nominated for best. In fact, I don't know whether it won or not, but it was nominated for best costume design, and should have been.
Oh, well, that makes me feel good.
Oh, yes.
It's been so long, I forget.
Oh, yeah.
I wish I could tell you have some anecdotes that I recalled, but I do remember that working with him was a joyous experience. We laughed a lot between scenes. And he was on his good behavior.
Oh, that's wonderful. And I hear that he really had a terrific sense of humor.
He did. He was funny. He and his friends were the ones who propped up, was it John Barrymore? No?
Oh, yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
They were naughty. They really were naughty. But they did wonderful. He was a great gagster. He just loved to pull a joke on someone.
Well, you know the famous story, which I never believed.
W.C. Fields.
Well, no, of John Barrymore. When John Barrymore died, and of course Errol Flynn was a great friend of John Barrymore.
Yeah.
And when John Barrymore died, Raoul Walsh and his pals went to the undertaker.
They kidnapped him.
Yes, they kidnapped John Barrymore's body and said, "Can we please borrow John Barrymore's body? We'll bring it right back." They rushed.
And they did. They kept their word. They did bring him back.
They did bring him back, but they took the corpse of John Barrymore, put the corpse in a dressing gown, sat the corpse down in a chair, holding a drink.
That's right.
How they got him to hold a drink, I never know. And Errol Flynn comes back from work and
Scotch
walks.
tape will do wonders.
And Flynn walks in, and you can imagine Flynn's reaction.
Is that the wildest? No, that was a very famous in town.
Yeah, it should be.
We were all absolutely delighted and horrified at the same time.
And
he was a funny man. He was just deliciously off center.
Yeah. And you know, the wonderful thing about his performance in Don Juan is that he's basically making fun of himself.
Oh yes.
And that's
absolutely.
Yeah. It's the first time I think he really did that, and as you say, I think he was one of the most underrated actors in film.
He would have been an absolutely brilliant, serious actor.
Yeah.
If Warner Brothers had ever assigned him any of those roles.
And he knew that.
But he was always swinging from the treetops like Tarzan, and galloping up to the rescue.
And the fact is, his private life was very highly publicized. And
indeed it was.
It didn't help.
And justifiably so.
Oh, yes. I mean, he was
liked very young women.
I think he was. Well, that's what Errol Flynn's daughter Rory, who's also on this show.
She's a lovely person,
isn't she? She's just charming.
And she has a son,
who's an actor.
Yes.
And who's named after, I believe, her brother Sean, who was Sean Flynn, who's the son of Errol Flynn, who was unfortunately killed in Vietnam.
Yes, he just vanished,
never to be found again. I think he was there as a reporter, and it's an amazing story. But I do want to thank you so much for sharing your impressions of Errol Flynn.
Well, I just loved him. I thoroughly enjoyed working with him. It almost made me decide to keep on working.
Oh, that's great to hear.
We pause now for station identification.
DVD Classics Corner on the Air is exclusively produced and released by Dick Dinman's Double D Productions, Inc. All rights reserved. My guest is Errol Flynn's daughter, Rory Flynn, and she'll shed light on a side of Errol Flynn that may surprise even his greatest fans. Rory, I want to welcome you to DVD Classics Corner on the Air. It's really wonderful to have you here. And, you know, I spent a little bit of time last night looking at samples of your book. I have to admit, I have not read the entire book yet, but I was able to look at some samples on your website.
Okay.
And I have to tell you, what a lovely remembrance of your dad. I mean, you know what your book does is it paints a picture of Errol Flynn that no one else possibly could.
I agree with you, and just first, I just want to thank you for having me on your show.
Oh, it's a great pleasure.
I feel quite privileged to be sitting here talking with you, and I appreciate your talking with me.
Oh,
so,
I'm enjoying
it.
it.
The book, just as you said, is my memories of my dad, and it does paint a picture of him that no one else has seen, because there's just a couple of us children to remember these particular stories. the one thing that I did avoid doing, obviously, was getting into a biography on my dad. There's been 20 other people who have done that, including himself. I mean, it doesn't need to be
exactly rehashed.
And if somebody is a Flynn fan, then this is just another window into the heart of my father, which is just a personal side of him and a personal take, and it's definitely from a 12-year-old point of view.
Well, this is what makes it so special.
He had a way with kids, that's for sure. He definitely treated us in an adult way and not a namsy-pamsy way. There was no whining or little kid stuff. He treated us very much like adults, and it's very much what I do with my son. From the time he was young was, talk to him in an adult way and keep that level always going. So.
Right. It's very important. And also, one of the things about your dad that I find very sad, candidly, is his lack of appreciation for his talents. He didn't know how good he was. I get the impression he was always putting down his performances, and I think that's
well, where I think that comes from is, there was he understood the fans and he understood the people that loved him, but the people who didn't were his peers that sort of laughingly looked at him as more of a cartoon, the swashbuckler, although I personally think they were all totally jealous. But I think he got, and I don't even think they actually did that. I think that's was his insecurity about his acting ability. And it was an insecurity, but he didn't get he really always wanted his peers to have a good impression of him, and he felt that was never up to par. He understood the people loved that, but it was his peers, I think he didn't get the respect from that he would have, really liked. And
certainly not. And the incredible thing is that, as Stewart Granger says on this show, what Errol Flynn did, virtually no one else could do, because there have been no other actors, except possibly Stewart Granger for a short time, who were able to play costume the way Errol Flynn did. It's a very rare talent.
I totally agree with you, and there is people that would say, the most interesting thing about Errol Flynn's film career was not in films. His life was actually bigger in real life than the films. It's hard to explain it, but I think that he really loved living life, and that's what he did. He didn't just focus on a career or this and that. He wanted to enjoy every minute of his day, and when he wasn't doing something, he was on his boat or he was writing. And I feel also that he was a wannabe writer. He really wanted to be a writer, and he never and he tried many times, as you know. He's done 2 novels and he wrote his autobiography. But secretly, I think that if he had lived longer, he would have written a lot more, and he probably would have had another career completely.
I would agree.
With writing, maybe writing films, maybe, who knows? But I think writing was a secret love.
Yes, no question about that.
There's so many wonderful films of his that have been overlooked.
That's right.
Objective Burma is one of my absolute favorite films.
Mine too.
He was brilliant in that. He had many shining moments. I think this is why he's the envy of so many men, is that it's so clear that he enjoyed his life. He didn't have he had a huge life, and he died young. So
yes,
the Fast and the Furious are...
When I was a kid, I took fencing class, strictly because I so much wanted to be Errol Flynn. Unfortunately, that's the bad news is I ended up being Dick Dinman. But I tried.
Oh,
I
I'm sure it's not bad news. But he left quite an impression. He was hopefully they're going to put his, make a little, they're doing a Walk of Fame in Australia.
Yes.
And of course they're, putting him into this Walk of Fame, their most famous Australians.
I'm sure you realize now that Errol Flynn is one of the very, very few stars who are as popular today, believe it or not, as they were when they were alive. But, certainly Bogart, certainly Cary Grant, but definitely Errol Flynn. I know of many young people. I'm talking about people who are today, 15, 16, that age, who think Errol Flynn is just the greatest thing they've ever seen. And I wonder,
that is really exciting.
Yes,
because
it is.
I really did think that he has lost a generation, mainly because he is sort of, as far as I'm concerned, a little bit of a black sheep in the Hollywood academy.
Yeah.
The people that surround that,
Yes.
the elite of Hollywood. And it's interesting because there's hardly a book that you don't open, that his name isn't mentioned or something referred to Errol Flynn.
Yeah.
And yet, literary, he is really some sort of, he's in almost everyday speech. You know what I mean? But yet he is not recognized by the Academy in so many ways.
Well, wait a minute now. What that is a complete repeat of his lifetime, because he was not appreciated by his peers during his lifetime, but audiences absolutely adored him.
I saw a clip once of my dad coming back from some journey, and he's being interviewed by reporters, and they are saying to him, gee, I heard that you are now being nominated for Best Supporting Actor for The Sun Also Rises.
Yes.
You so deserve it, blah, blah, blah. And I'm watching his face, and I don't think I ever saw him look happier. I mean, it was really amazing when he saw that. He felt so good. He was so proud. He was standing so tall. And this must have been 1957.
Yeah.
Somehow that nomination was pulled. But when he had returned from, into L.A. and the reporters were interviewing him and they said that, I just saw his eyes light up like he'd finally sort of accomplished what he wanted, which was recognition by his peers,
Yes, yes.
If I hadn't seen that, I wouldn't have been so sure that it did matter a little bit to him because, his whole exterior is that nothing mattered.
Yeah.
Well, it did matter to him.
Yeah,
it did. It was his life that he spent on the screen.
And you look at that and you see his performance, and it took a lot of courage to play that role and to take fourth billing, which,
I think the last few roles of his life, I think that was what was discouraging him, is that he did play a drunk in Too Much Too Soon.
Yeah.
The
Roots
Sun
of
Also
Heaven.
Rises,
Roots of Heaven.
and another film.
Yeah.
And, he was feeling pretty typecast there, too.
Yeah.
And saying, oh, well, this is easy, But it wasn't. You're right. He was very nonchalant about it. He was very humble about it. But as I said, when I saw those reporters interviewing him, and it was a rare film clip. I only saw it recently. And my heart just stopped when I saw that, wow, it really meant a lot that he was going to be nominated.
All through his earlier films, people said, well, he's playing himself. He's a swashbuckler in life, and he's a swashbuckler on film. Anybody could do that, right?
Yeah, not
Then, of course, the next stage, well, he's playing a drunk. What else is he going to play? Anybody can do that, right?
Yeah, I know.
Sure.
Try lifting one of those swords. See how anybody can do that. It's not true at all. If he wasn't, so physically magnificent. Hopefully this will, like you say, will bring him more to the limelight of this generation. In my book,
yes.
I was able to, I think, show that my dad really was happy before he died, although professionally he wasn't.
No,
but
no.
In his personal life, with his children, and we all adored him, and all of his women adored him, and all of his wives adored him, and he triumphed there, and whether he knew it or not, he did triumph in his personal life.
Very
the one
few
thing I
people-
want to say, how I started to tell you was that this is my story, but it also happens to be the love story of my mother and father. And it's not in my words, it's in my father's words. My mother happened to have passed away a few years ago, left me her love letters that he sent her over the years. And I reproduced them in the book so that you could see the man through his own words, not through mine, not through some biographers, not through somebody who had never met him, but through his very own words, his love letters to my mother. It's their love story, and it's really, really touching. I think I tried to present this book really honestly. It's just my stories, and in their own words from my father and my brother who have passed away. And I think that's as honest as I can get.
Everyone who hears this show and is a fan of Errol Flynn cannot afford to miss this wonderful book, which is called The Baron of Mulholland, I believe. Am I correct?
That's right.
And it's available instantly if you go to inlikeflynn.com.
I spent 3 years putting this photo memoir together because it is all personal photos. A lot of them have never been seen.
Yes.
From my grandmother that took pictures and, accumulating the letters and putting it all together. And it's done totally with love. And I also wanted to leave my son another idea of who his grandfather is, which is important because he hears things all the time, and I wanted to have sort of almost a last word. I don't know who else is going to write another book about my dad.
I hope
sure
nobody.
There will be another one. But at least this is from a member of the family and somebody who spent quality time with him up until he died when I was 12. So.
Rory, I want to thank you so much for joining me and talking about your dad.
Gee, thank you again for having me on your show. It was really lovely talking to you.
It's a pleasure, and I'm looking forward to you writing another book.
I hope so.
Well, get to work.
I hope so. There's not much left. Not on this subject. There's not much left to say. Put my heart into it, and everybody else has said what they had to say, and even my dad has said what he had to say. So I don't know if we can go any further on this subject, but I sure hope everybody enjoys reading it, and I hope you do too.
Oh, so. I definitely will. And Rory, you're wonderful to talk to. It's a great pleasure to have you on the show, and I thank you so much for taking the time.
Oh, thank you. It was my pleasure.
Pretty, perky Joan Leslie was all of 16 years old when her leading role opposite Gary Cooper in Sergeant York made her a star at Warner Brothers. Now Joan tells me of the lengths that Warner Brothers went to keep her and Errol Flynn apart. You and I spoke about this yesterday. I happened to mention that you were cast at Warner's opposite virtually every Warner Brothers leading man, with one very notable exception, Errol Flynn.
Oh, yes.
Now, what? Now, was there ever any talk of putting you in a picture with Flynn, or?
No, certainly not.
No.
No, they were very much for preserving my reputation as sweet and innocent young lady. I don't know if I ever told you this story, but there was a very large party held during the war where Warner J.L. himself personally entertained some of the high brass in the Army, and he made everybody turn out for it. I mean, Betty Davis was there, Ann Sheridan, and of course I was invited, and Errol was invited, and I had never met him. And there we were at this cocktail party, and he was across the room, and I couldn't help but see him. It was the first time I'd ever seen him in person. And I thought, oh, my goodness, what an attractive man. He's just as beautiful as I thought he would be.
Yeah.
And with that, he caught my eye. And he walked over toward me, and we shook hands and said, how do you do? Isn't it amazing we've never met? At which moment, flashbulbs went off. They were taking pictures all over the place with the brass and the movie stars. But this time, it was Errol and Joni. Well, publicists swarmed in on the photographers and said, "Oh, no, you don't. Let's get that negative out of there and destroy it right now. Nobody's taking any pictures of Errol with Joan." Oh. That was the end of that.
Why?
And so we parted. And Errol looked back at me with a wink, and I gave him a smile, and we never had another word. Oh, he was in such hot water all the time with his reputation, you know.
Oh, I know. So what you're saying is Warner's was afraid that you'd corrupt Errol.
Well, that might have accrued somebody.
Well, that's my show for today. DVD Classics Corner on the Air is conceived, written, produced, and directed by me, Double D. And if you'd like to hear some of my older vintage shows, please go to www.dvdclassicscorner.net, where in addition to the broadcasts, you'll find hundreds of my print reviews of classic DVD releases. So, until next week,
Keep well, keep happy, and keep listening.